breath of fresh air. I'm John Quay, and things are much different now. My 94 E320 was mostly a blank canvas when I bought it, with the exception of the H&R lowering springs paired with the Bilstein shocks. With my plan to mold a wide body and wider wheels with the DTM race car fit, I'll need to run a suspension setup with some adjustments. But first I'll need to address an issue that every 90s band suffers from: the biodegradable wire harness. Every desirable car from this time period seems to have its flaws that everyone talks about.
The W124 was built in an era of over-engineering at Mercedes-Benz. However, those masterminds supplied the upper engine wire harness with biodegradable insulation. They couldn't withstand the heat of the engine, so it biodegraded faster than any of us would have liked.
I've told you about my frustrations not having a garage to work in, and I've completely lost any motivation to work in my driveway next to the garage that should be mine, but isn't. Without the motivation to get this task done, I decided to switch things up, switch up the scenery a bit. Sometimes I feel like if it looks better, I'll work better. Look good, feel good.
I came across a parking garage that had some cool lighting, and I squeaked my way in. I love how the hood opens. Extra open. Welcome to Club Quay.
I've never replaced a wire harness before. It always seemed to be an intimidating task. But like anything that's intimidating, I'll jump right in. If you stick around, I'll show you a couple of my tricks. The wire harness begins behind the battery. Shamas. The best advice I could give doing any wire harness job is to unplug a few, take the new wire harness, and then plug a few.
Who knew about the plug a few?
Doing this as you go will prevent you from getting lost in the sauce.
Where do I go? Which way? On this M104 straight 6, following the upper engine wire harness from the battery, it jumps over to the mass airflow sensor, to the rear of the engine, sliding through to the valve cover into the coil packs, splitting off to the fuel rail, a few connectors at the front of the engine, the other end going down to the throttle body, up to the water pump, and over to the cruise control module on the driver's side. Gotta love those hard to reach places. In the future I'd like to turbo this car, the German 2JZ. I really don't know as much about engines as I should. I dropped out of tech school before I got to that part. And when it comes to working on cars, I could never pay attention to something that I wasn't interested in. I'll pay someone to work on a car I don't like, but when it comes to cars I actually do like, I'll do whatever it takes to figure out how to do it myself. Go figure. And you can't just replace the wire harness, you also have to replace the throttle body, which also has a biodegradable wire harness. No good. Getting it through the intake manifold required shifting it around every which way. There's a connecting rod behind it that was a real pain to get to. So I double checked everything, making sure I didn't have to reach back there again. I really just want to be able to enjoy this thing. I bought it to be my daily driver. Now I'm driving to random parking garages to deal with this business. It's pretty frustrating knowing what lies behind the curtains. All original, never painted.
Midway through the job, the parking garage's fire alarms went off. It felt as if someone was trying to annoy me out of there. But obviously I couldn't leave until the job was done. It felt like the sounds were piercing through my brain.
I began to lose focus, as if I was in a hazy fog.
I started looking around thinking someone was watching me. Paranoia. I don't know what it is working on this car. There's always something that seems to go wrong.
But I use the alarm annoyance as motivation to work faster. It's a party now. I desperately need to repaint the valve cover. I'll take care of that when I paint my new wheels. Probably the same color.
Luckily, the fire alarms eventually went off, and my focus came back to keep me company.
And my focus told me I had to keep moving quickly as night was approaching. I really can't wait to clean all this up, but now is not the time. Fire hazard.
And of course, the last couple connectors decided to give me a hard time.
And it didn't help that I was in a hurry. Whatever, time to plug a few. Bio-degradable. Been waiting this whole time to do that. Sometimes I'll make up a reason to motivate myself. Motivation, such an aggravation. I'd get a lot more done if I wasn't playing with cameras so much. But for me, I love it. Party's over. Don't mind the bulb light and the washer fluid light. I still have to finish that stuff up. It started up with no issues, and I checked to make sure everything worked properly. And just as I had entered, I squeaked my way out of there.
I'm just glad I finished up before it got dark.
Who knows what happens in that garage at night? And of course, I didn't leave the old wire harness behind, so the next day, I sliced it open to see what all the fuss is about. I bought my updated wire harness and throttle body on eBay. If you're looking to get yourself a W124, you're looking for the updated Delphi tags on the harness behind the battery. And with the throttle body, you're looking for the year of 1998. 1998 is known to be the safest year for the wiring harness updates. I really don't know how the car ran as decent as it did. It looked as if every single wire was making contact with the ones next to them. It's too much to touch. About a week later, something amazing happened. The coolest little guy has entered the world. I can't even put my feelings into words. Life's biggest adjustment. As if becoming a father wasn't enough, my wife and I decided to move back to our small town to be closer with family. It's safe to say I've had some good times living in New York City and Stamford, Connecticut. I've seen a lot, maybe too much. But sometimes you need to take a couple steps backwards to move forwards. Adjusting the settings to a more relaxing habitat will give me more grip, better handling. Moved into yet another small apartment to save some money. And unfortunately, there is no garage, and I have to park my car pretty far away next to this thing. And this is all relevant to the progress of this car. The area that you live in will affect you as a car enthusiast. Finding the time and space to work on a car is much easier here. Not to mention I have an old car of mine that's been stashed away here for 7 years. And for 7 years I've had views of city skylines and the sound of sirens at a distance. And now I'm back to the views of Pennsylvania mountains with birds chirping. I'll definitely miss my old job, painting high-end cars for the rich and famous. There's no other way to describe it other than unreal. Along with all the friends that I made along the way. The good times kept on rolling.
What up?
And I can't forget to mention all the new lingo that I've picked up.
Italian style, no? Italian style.
Whatever.
Chalant.
Whatever.
Something that happens working with a bunch of people from all over the world. I was fortunate enough to get a new job locked in before moving. And instead of painting, I'm now a body technician. Disassembling the car, doing the body work, and then assembling. Chopping off panels on the everyday car for the friendly neighbor. I've done some body work before, but nothing like this. The manual labor is much more intense than I'm used to. Gotta do what you gotta do. I feel like I need to do more push-ups or something. All of this has been a major adjustment. It'd be awesome if I could make videos for a living. Maybe one day. It never stops. The times never stop changing.
What's up, bro? What's up, bro? What's up, bro? What's going on? Changing the suspension and ride height is something I've done to just about every car I've owned. It completely changes the personality of the car, and the ride height determines the personality. In the past, I'd lower my cars all the way down, to the ground, just because I thought it looked amazing. But I have mixed feelings about that now. After owning my Porsche 997, I started to really appreciate how a car really feels when you drive it. But it's still gotta look good. Real good.
DTM or touring cars of the early 90s will be my inspiration for this car. Slight negative camber up front, not much camber in the rear. Beefier tires all around.
And for now, let's say 0 wheel gap all around. I want the looks to match the function. I was fortunate enough to work on my car at the new shop I'm at after hours. I mentioned it would only take me a couple hours. Boy, was I wrong. The previous owner of this car installed H&R lowering springs with the Bilstein shocks.
Made in Germany? 100%. But the rear sat way higher than the front. No good.
But you can't adjust them without changing the spring pads. There really aren't many aftermarket options for the W124, at least in the United States.
I'm getting pulled over.
It's going well. My third brake light is out. He let me go with a warning. Nice guy.
I've purchased a set of Yellow Speed Racing Club Performance Coilovers. Made in the USA? Not really. With the external reservoirs, adjustable front camber plates, shock bodies, dampening settings, and obviously ride height.
In other words, nice adjustment. So far, every set of coilover that I've installed had McPherson front struts. You know, the coil over strut. The W124 oddly has divorced springs and struts, and that's something I never dealt with before. I stuck with this configuration because you can run a wider tire up front.
Aside from the springs and shocks on this car, everything suspension related is covered in rust. I'll deal with the rust the next time. Another video. I sprayed a PB Blaster foam on everything I was going to remove. I wouldn't suggest using the foam. It leaves an unpleasant mess and it didn't seem to work any better. I love a good excuse to whip out a hammer. Even with the PB Blaster, just about every nut and bolt gave me a hard time, and few of them had space for an impact gun. And I also love a good excuse to kick something. I'm no mechanic. Good habits and common sense come with experience and time. It's all about your mindset to learn. Normally you would buy a spring compressor to get these out. Mercedes-Benz actually makes a set for this car. However, I saw a video from Ludwig's garage where he dropped the ball joint from the knuckle on his W201, so I thought I'd give it a try. I'm very certain these brake dust shields are all seized, so I avoided taking them off. I've spoken about chasing perfection before, but in certain situations, you gotta pick and choose your battles. I couldn't leave this car here overnight, so I tried to avoid any situation I couldn't get myself out of. Out with the old, in with the new. Wasn't sure the most efficient way to do this install, so I did things differently on both sides to see what worked best. White zip ties. What an eyesore. Basically using a floor jack as a spring compressor. The install is much more difficult. It takes a lot of force to get the springs and everything back in place. With my patience on this ball joint spent, I went to the other side, as if it would be any easier. Gotta do something about these calipers. The list continues. Unlike the videos I've watched, getting the ball joints back into the knuckles turned into hours of headache. It's obvious the brake shields and rotors were preventing them from going in, but at that time I wasn't thinking very clearly. You want to avoid the car lifting off the jack stands. It's bad news. Becoming so unbelievably burnt out, I decided to take a break from the front and start the rears, hoping it would go much more smoothly. And to be honest, they really weren't that bad. Just those brake dust shields getting in the way and all the rusty bolts. I'm not 100% where I want to mount the external reservoirs. The Yellow Speed Racing instructions suggested the lower control arm as a mounting point. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm thinking up here for now. I drilled a bolt and used 2 zip ties to secure it temporarily. I'll basically have to redo this next time when I deal with all the rust. With the rears done, I went back to the front situation. Desperate to get out of there, I took a grinder to the end of the control arms to get them to fit. It's not the common sense route, but the ball joints were already shot, and I destroyed them even more. They'll need replaced anyway, and I learned best by ruining my own stuff. Better than ruining someone else's. And always last, but never least, the sway bar. Not the easiest thing to install by yourself. I'll torque all the hardware properly next time as well. With it now, hours later than I intended, I was anxious. I was anxious to get out of there. The coils still need to settle. They should go down about a 1/4 inch within a week or 2. It's not as gratifying as a new paint job, especially since it was already on lowering springs. I couldn't make any further progress on this car until these coilovers were installed. I'm just glad the rears more or less match the fronts now. But now I can get the car to sit exactly how I want it. Did you notice in the last video the car sat lower? It's got a long way to go yet. Once I get all the new parts in, I'll have to dial everything in to exactly how I want it. I have a full set of adjustable components for the rear that I need to install as well. And with all the rusty inconvenience, I'll need my own space to get the job done. And I can't believe I'm finally getting to say this, but that time is now. Until next time, thanks for watching.